So let's talk paranormal. But there are several things that I actually want to talk to you about before we get into the paranormal. And one of them being telepathy. Because apart from the paranormal, another thing that also interests me is telepathy and how people are just able to have conversations, or not necessarily conversations, but have the a transfer of information from one person to another. And sometimes we might pass it off as you knew exactly what I was thinking. Is that some form of telepathy?
Well, first, when you use the word paranormal, you're really talking about all of it.
Okay,
You can't have ghost sightings without telepathy, technically.
right.
So we can get into that a little bit later. Telepathy is really awareness of information from another person's mind. Could also
Mhm.
include emotions, for that matter. When you know what somebody's going to say, or when you say things the same time, the question is, how well do you know that person? Is this a normal, you're both experiencing the same stimulus, that because you know each other so well, you're going to react the same way? So it's the same kind of thing as finishing somebody else's sentences. If it's a spouse or a partner and you've been with that person for years, there's a really good chance that it has nothing to do with telepathy, that it's intuitive. In other words, it's in your head because you know how they're going to react. But when we do experiments in telepathy, when we're trying to do, which is really hard to pinned down to just telepathy. There's other psychic abilities, ESP abilities, that might allow for that information to come in. But when we do those experiments, we're making sure that one person is either looking at or being given a stimulus away from the other person, so that the other person could not possibly have known what the first person is actually seeing, perceiving, and so on, or thinking.
Huh.
That's the only way we know that that's going on. We do know that people report, and this is something that happens more frequently with dreams, in certain states of consciousness. They report having awareness of what another person's doing. They sometimes have, in dreaming situation, telepathic dreams are often what are called mutual dreams, where two people have the same dream the same night, and as they're talking together informally, one person says, "Hey, I had this dream about you last night," and the other one says, "Wait a minute, I had a dream about you. Were we at such and such a place?" And that kind of thing seems to be more in the range of actual telepathy than just knowing how to finish somebody else's sentence, which
Okay.
can be telepathy, but it's hard to tell.
Right. Because this is something that's like hard to really study, right? Uh,
Yeah.
but but I have read articles and I have read about studies that have been done. So there was this one study that was done with two people that were in different states. They were across
Hmm.
the country, but they were having this conversation. But they were also getting their brain waves analyzed while they were having
Yeah.
this conversation. So when they were having this conversation, they were just making a story as they went. But because it was such a similar experience, they were both having their brain frequencies were aligned. So
Yes.
there might be some science to it, and we might just think it as something that because we say telepathy, that it's just science fiction, it doesn't actually exist. But there's
Well,
some
and
science to
certainly
it.
it's certainly nothing like science fiction, for that matter. I mean, nobody does a mind probe or a deep dive into that kind of thing. But with the experiment you're talking about, having the brain waves align is certainly an indication that the brain states were the same, and that may be what's needed for people to connect that way. That's a possibility. I mean, we study things scientifically when we're looking at extrasensory perception, trying to eliminate any sensory leakage and look for what may be going on. But frankly, we don't. I guess we're not at a point in physics where we can say definitively, here's how this works. We're not at a point where we can detect anything that's going on. There's a lot of theories about how this might work, but when it comes right down to it, the closest we can get is that consciousness is capable of picking up information from the world around us without the use of our senses. And that kind of description also includes picking up other people, usually people we know, people we can connect with.
Right. So is it easier to have telepathic experiences with someone that you've known for so long than someone that you just met?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, people you have an emotional connection to. Emotions, that kind of personal connection makes a big difference for people too.
And it also happens, as you said, in dreams. It's something that
Yes.
dreams could align.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that the dream state is an altered state in which
Mhm,
there are no rules. We as waking people, waking consciousness, we are subjected to all these rules and frankly biases about psychic ability in general,
mhm,
that it's weird, that it's strange, that it's impossible. But in the dream state, it's completely okay to do weird things,
mhm,
because it's just a dream. You can always write it off in that way. So in dreams, people do have very often telepathic dreams with other people. But again, they have to have it obviously with someone else. The other is precognitive dreams or premonition dreams, picking
mhm.
up something about a future, a probable future or something like that, which doesn't have to be a major thing. I mean, the skeptics, the people who call themselves skeptics, who are not really skeptics, they're actually what we call pseudo skeptics, the
Mhm.
disbelievers. They'll say it's just, well, these things never come true. This is just random chance, all of that. The reality seems to be that people can pick up a lot of mundane things. It is not the case that people have dramatic precognitive or premonitory dreams about world events. Most of the precognitive dreams people have are very, very mundane, day-to-day things that even happen at work the next day.
Yeah,
So nothing that's going to get like into the newspaper at all.
right. So when you talk about premonitions, I actually have a personal story. And because it's not always while you're dreaming that you could have a premonition.
Oh,
Because,
absolutely. Precognition happens at any time. And in fact, we have those experiences without even being aware of them.
yeah, and it takes a special person. I don't even know if it's a special person, but it takes an individual to be attuned with their own thoughts to recognize that they are having a premonition. Because
Yes.
so one of my personal experiences that I have is, so I went to the gas station, right? I drove down to the gas station, which was like at the corner of uh my place, and it was just like a 5 minute run, and I had just this thought of a car getting t-boned on this intersection going back home. So on my way back home, there actually was a car that got t-boned. And I mean, I was at the gas station for like 5 minutes. I went through that intersection, came back, and there was an accident. So I know that premonitions are real, because I mean, what else can you consider that? It's not a coincidence.
No, well, I mean, one, there are coincidences, but I would say it's not. The pseudo skeptics would say, well, how many times have you ever had that thought come into your head that there was going to be an accident? And the odds are probably not very often at all.
Mhm.
It probably wasn't even, it didn't occur to you unless you actually saw an accident happen, that was something that could happen to people. So it's against the odds, you might say, to have those kinds of experiences. Now, the odd thing that we do know is that if you get enough information related to yourself, you can possibly avoid. So if you were having that premonition about you getting T-boned in an intersection, you could have changed that. And of course, that might have meant somebody else got T-boned, but
Mhm.
that's not you. So you changed your future. And it does seem that, unlike what people always want psychics to do, which is tell the future accurately, it is no better than weather prediction. In fact,
Mhm.
it's probably a little worse because you have human beings making decisions that affect the future that someone's trying to pick up on. So as soon as, for example, a psychic tells you tomorrow you're going to run into this situation at work,
Right.
and you don't want to do that, so maybe you call in sick that day. So it never happens. So now the psychic was wrong, but had you gone to work, the psychic might have been right. There's no way to know which one would have been the case. So that's often called an intervention paradox. We intervene with these predictions, we change the outcomes. It doesn't mean the psychic was wrong because the psychic was telling you what the future was, unless you make that decision to stay home.
Mm. So
But it boils down to this issue of, is the future set in stone? And for us, we're pretty sure it's not.
what makes you say that? Because it seems like it is. It seems like whatever we're experiencing now, it has already happened.
Well, I mean, it has happened. It's in the past, and there are many different philosophies or philosophical descriptions of how time works. In fact, in physics, there's a lot of variation as well. Time is one of those things that is honestly very difficult to pin down. We don't know enough about it. We do know certain things like Einstein's theory of relativity, and basically time dilation is a real thing. Perception of time is definitely a real thing in general, but it does seem that we can intervene in certain, especially events that affect us directly or we are connected to. We can intervene in those and change that prediction. Now, the prediction might have been wrong to begin with. It might have put you on the path to get to that other future. It's just really hard to really get to that point and decide what's really going on. And to say, of course, the people will, again, the pseudo skeptics, the disbelievers will say, well, psychics make predictions all the time and they're usually wrong. I said, well, I can tell you that's the case again with meteorologists. Unless they're talking about 2 hours from now, they're generally wrong with things or not exactly right. And that's a physical science. People who predict the stock market are often wrong. You predict anything that has a probability to it, and there's a possibility that that probability might change. And that seems to be the case with our future as well. But that's not to say that there aren't models of time which are simultaneous time, that it's all existing at the same moment. There's different variations of what time actually is, but we really can't say any more than we don't really know exactly how it works.
Right. So like one of my favorite movies is Back to the Future. And
Oh yeah, yeah.
the biggest thing that I take away from that movie is that you can't go into the future or into the past and affect any of the current events because you might affect the future, and who knows how the future might turn out to be, right?
Well, I think that a good amount of time travel literature talks about that. The idea that you go back in time and into the dinosaur time and step on an insect like a butterfly. This is where the butterfly effect comes from. And
Mhm.
you stepped on the wrong butterfly because now you come back to the future and it's like completely changed. Not even human beings at that point. So Back to the Future 2 did a great explanation, which I think gave people headaches,
Mhm.
of diverging timelines. And Star Trek's done that for a long time. Science fiction has explored all sorts of issues of time. And the issue here is, when somebody makes a prediction, if there are diverging timelines, like some physicists believe, parallel universes, things like that, if they are in existence, a psychic may not be latching onto the right future
Mhm.
for the you that is here. It could be the you in a different timeline in that instance.
So that's a good case for alternate timelines because I've also heard that every decision that you make, uh, what happens after that decision is that you create several different reactions with different dimensions. So honestly, that brings to the question: is the future, or is time as we know it, already set in stone, or if every dimension that we're living through has already been set in stone, which causes a premonition if it goes back to what you're believing? And then also the question that I have is, we know that at least from my own experience, that if you go into a haunted house or
Mm-hmm.
a house that is rumored to be haunted, there is a change in energy. There's a shift in energy that you could feel. And is that part of this dimension, or is it dimensions that are overlapping with one another?
So when you're talking about a haunted place, there's a couple possibilities that we look at when there's actual activity there. One is the majority of these situations, which seems to relate to what on ghost hunting shows they call it residual hauntings. The idea, or people sometimes talk about psychic imprints or imprinted information, or place memory is a term we've used in the field of parapsychology. And the idea is that the environment holds information, and depending on the environmental conditions, people might pick up that imprinted information, that recorded information, and do a playback in your head. And people don't experience the same thing. As you said, sometimes people feel a shift. It feels different. You can call it energy, you can call it emotion, whatever you're picking up. You feel something, and that is a psychic thing that you're picking up on. In other words, you're picking up on information in the location. If you suddenly see things happening and they repeat patterns, there's no interaction at all, we would call that a haunting. And that it seems to be you picking up on something that happened in the past, maybe the recent past, maybe years ago. Um, it is not related to dead people directly any
Mhm.
more than old movies are related to dead people or people who are dead now, but it is something we pick up on. And the most common expression of that is when people go house hunting or apartment hunting, and you walk into an apartment or house, and man, it feels great. I want to live here.
Mhm.
And there's nothing about it that visually or otherwise seems different than the next apartment you go to. But it may be that the people who live there are putting out enough positive vibes, positive energy. It's kind of a vibe thing. The negative is you walk into a place, and regardless of what it looks like, there's no negative smell. It doesn't look bad. It just feels icky, and you don't want to live there. And it could be because maybe the couple that lives there or the family that lives there has been having fights. Is the reason the place is available is because they're getting a divorce. There's any number of things that can happen in that way. So those are the most common kinds of hauntings. Now, if you're in a haunted house and there's a figure there and that figure reacts to you, or you can seemingly have some sort of interaction, we would call that an apparition or what people call a ghost, something that seems to represent consciousness after that person has died. That's different than a haunting. You can still say the house is haunted, but you can also say that the bar Cheers is haunted by Norm and Cliff because they're always there. So
Mhm. So
from the TV show.
The Amityville house is a good example of a house that holds a lot of bad energy, right?
Well, that's a good question. There was a significant family murder there, a mass murder. That would have left a negative imprint, and that's what I understand the reality of that house was. The stuff that was in the Amityville horror didn't happen.
Mhm.
The book, the movie was based on the book. Jay Anson wrote the book based on interviews. The Lutz family only lived there for a few weeks. They were already out of there. They had a book contract fairly quickly. The family was encouraged by the attorney who sold them the house, who speculated the house might be haunted, and that seems to kind of snowball quite a bit. The research that was done at that time by actual legitimate researchers and investigators indicated that what was reported did not happen. But I have no doubt that the family felt bad stuff, bad energy in the house because of that murder, because of what happened, the people dying.
So it was not the murder well, it was not what happened before the murder, but it was the murder itself that gave it this notoriety of what
Right.
it is now.
Yeah, there was nothing that happened before the murder.
Yeah. Because I've also gone to the Purisima mission that is in Lompoc, California.
Okay.
And it is known to be haunted, and it's even been featured in Ghost Adventures. So that place is known to be haunted, and you go into this mission and you feel that energy. But I
Mm,
don't know how much
sure.
of that is due to your own psychology or the actual energy in that building.
Well, you raised an important question, and that is how much is done is related to suggestion. And a lot of what I see ghost hunters who follow the locations they see on TV, especially the ones that are built up to be very spooky, especially by Ghost Adventures, which is the wrong way to do any. They're not really investigating; they're just there to try to see if they can experience something. That leaves people with bias, with something they're expecting to experience. And what I also hear from some ghost hunters is they go to these places and nothing happens. They don't want to do this anymore. So they get very disappointed very quickly because it's not something that happens all the time. And not everybody can pick these vibes up. It's not something that everyone experiences in general.
So, what is the difference between ghost hunting and what Ghost Adventures is actually doing?
Well, they're first of all, they are not doing investigations. And what you see in reality TV shows does not represent an actual scientific or appropriate investigation of a location in general. No one in my field investigates in the dark. That makes
Mhm.
no sense at all, especially given that most experiences that the people who live there or work there talk about happen during the daytime or when the lights are on, if they're there even at night. We don't focus on the equipment. The equipment, we do use equipment for environmental readings and sense and basically data, because we want to see what's going on when somebody has an experience versus when they don't. And sometimes it's the environment itself that causes people to think that there are ghosts there, not actual entities that do that. There are ways that our bodies experience the environment that people conclude it might be something paranormal. So that's a big piece of it. We don't yell at ghosts. I mean, we might try to talk to coax them out. That's certainly something we do. But this whole idea of going into and locking yourself in the dark, waiting for something to happen, calling out, is not an investigation, and especially when you're not actually doing intensive interviews with the witnesses themselves. And frankly, when I teach, because I teach online courses in parapsychology, I just finished a field investigations class. And one of the main things that students have to understand, that people who want to do this, is you have to have good interviewing skills, because you need the ghost story to start with. And you need to talk to firsthand witnesses, not just rumors and things like that. So we don't investigate spooky places just because they're spooky or just because somebody says, oh, that place is haunted. It's like, I need to talk to a witness. How do I know if it was haunted 20 years ago that it's still haunted? I mean, how do I know
Mhm.
that? So I have to talk to somebody who's had a recent experience for that.
So, have you always been a believer, or was there something that happened that made you believe in ghosts?
Well, I would say that I wasn't always a believer per se. Now,
Mhm.
I got interested in the subject when I was a kid, and I started reading probably around age 13 or 14 on the scientific literature on ESP, on psychokinesis, mind over matter, and also on survival of bodily death, the idea that people can stick around in an afterlife. And there was really a lot of literature, a lot of evidence from a scientific perspective analyzed that way. So I certainly accepted that these things are absolutely possible. I had a case in 1985 where the only explanation we had based on what was going on with the interviews with the family, and actually an interview with the ghost through one of the witnesses. Um, Too much information, couldn't have been known any other way, and there were additional factors that indicated that we actually were in a room during the afternoon with a sit down with this 12-year-old boy who was seeing and talking to this ghost every day, even though the other family members had also seen her. So much so that, yes, that pushed me over the line that this is more than just literature and evidence. I personally do believe that some people can stick around after death. Certainly not everybody. That's the case. And I've had other experiences since then, or other cases where that seemed to be the best explanation for things.
So, what was, or what has been like the most frightening thing that you've actually experienced?
A drunken husband pulling out a gun in a case where the woman said that she was being attacked by a poltergeist, and he came home, didn't know I was there, and he was already drunk, and he pulled out a gun. I think that was the most frightening thing I've experienced.
Well,
I've honestly never experienced anything that scared me as far as something paranormal.
really? So, have you ever done any own experiences like in a dark room? Because you said that's not really a investigation,
I
but
mean,
have you ever done it?
I try to sleep in a pitch dark room, so darkness doesn't bother me. And I've been in places where it's been pitch dark. Sometimes there's nothing, no good evidence from that we see within our field that the activity is going to harm you other than potentially psychologically or emotionally. In other words, you can get scared, you can get a little freaked out. That could have a little PTSD for it. These experiences can be very unusual for people. But personally, I don't worry about anything at all bothering me. As one of the mediums I worked with over the years said, "We're alive, they're dead. We have the same power they do, but we're alive, which means we have more power. So they can't do anything to us."
So, what about poltergeists? You don't fear those as well?
Well, poltergeist is actually not what they're talked about on TV. I mean, the term itself goes back hundreds of years to a time period. It was coined in the 16th century in Germany at the latest, actually probably earlier than that, relating to cases that involve physical activity, almost never anybody seeing a ghost. They didn't see something, physical stuff. So everybody could see stuff moving. So these are physical activity. In the 20th century, thanks to a researcher named Nandor Fodor, and then later on William Roll, who came up with a good model, we've determined that poltergeist phenomena, these cases of physical activity, are related to the unconscious mind of one of the living people in the location, in the home or in the workplace. Nothing to do with spirits at all. And we have ways of working, once we figure out who's doing it, we have ways of getting it to stop or even coming under control. People rarely ever get hurt. The people who get hurt typically are the poltergeist agents themselves. Typically, there's some self-directed stuff that does happen. So that sometimes is a tell for us. But we don't see this as otherwise dangerous. In fact, Bill Roll used to say the easiest way to get phenomena to stop is to bring in a parapsychologist, because it just immediately stops as soon as we walk in.
And like, what about demons and black entities? Any of them?
No, I mean, first of all, there's no science behind demons. That's all religion or mythology. When people say black entities, I have to ask them a lot of questions about what they're talking about. Shadow people, which is again, that's the same thing. That sometimes people do see a figure. They're not seeing. Now, the thing about ghosts is you're not seeing that ghost with your eyes. We know that. This is something we absolutely know. And we know it for a lot of reasons. Ghosts are not an optical phenomenon. Neither are these so-called shadow people. And what happens in some of these cases where people saw a shadowy figure is that someone else who might be present at the time doesn't see a shadowy figure. Instead, they see a fully formed, fully clothed person.
Hmm.
So it looks like the person who's seeing the shadowy figure is not a good receiver, you might say. They're not getting that figure, that information, that broadcast is not coming in strongly. So they are interpreting that. And because people see darkness as negative, they immediately assume that this is a bad or evil entity, that the shadow figure is an evil thing. That's an assumption that doesn't hold up in general, across the boards. We don't deal with demons. Again, I have people saying, I have a demonic entity in my house. I go, what is he doing? He's standing at the foot of the stairs, staring at me. I said, what's demonic about that? That's maybe invasive from a, person perspective, but that's not demonic. That's pretty annoying. It's pretty, weird, but you have to look past these interpretations, especially since the interpretations of demons have gotten blown out of proportion since the very beginning of these ghost hunting shows in the early 2000s. That the shows always go to fear because that gets ratings. Fear and spooky gets ratings. Friendly ghosts don't get ratings, except in comedies like the TV show Ghosts.
Yeah, because something that Zach Bagans likes to play on is the fear of ghosts.
Yeah. I don't pay any attention to what he says. Not at all. None.
Yeah, because
he's a TV personality.
And a good one at that, because he does make you have the
ratings.
fear.
Yeah, sure.
Right? That's because that's what scary movies do. They like to have that fear component. And
Stranger Things got a lot of got a lot of eyes on it,
Yeah.
So,
and do you ever deal with anyone that actually has that experience of being afraid and you have to calm them down? Because you did mention someone saying that there's a demon staring back at them.
Yes. We find that because, and a lot of this is because either of religion, because of Western culture in general, but because of religion and because of pop culture, that people have an experience, and because it's out of the ordinary for them, these days, again, more frequently, it freaks them out and they get afraid. People even are afraid of when they experience the most common ghostly experience, which is to see a loved one, like a relative, a friend who just passed away. They might see that person or experience that person in some way in the first couple of days, and they get freaked out. And it's like, that person's there. If that person really did come to you, they're there to say goodbye. That's not a negative thing. It's a positive thing. So the fear reaction is something that we expect very often. In fact, the majority of the cases that come into our field are people who are afraid, even though there may even be a normal explanation, they're still afraid. So we have to work through that. And there are therapists and counselors that we refer people to when they really have been affected deeply by the experience they've had because they're so unusual. We had a poltergeist case here in the Bay Area where the husband, who is an engineer, um, actually saw stuff moving. I mean, he saw stuff moving and flying, and it was so outside of his belief system and his acceptance of how reality works that he, even though he believed what he saw, he had a real deep stress reaction. I mean, it stressed him out to the point where he had to see a therapist afterwards for
Mhm.
that. So it's not the actual paranormal experience, it's the after effects when you have that kind of fear reaction. So for
Yeah.
people who get hooked on these shows and they think that all this stuff is negative, it is creating a lasting reaction in the public that we have to battle quite often.
Right. Yeah, because I've had personal experiences, and I like to consider myself a skeptic, but not a non-believer, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I call myself a situational skeptic. I do believe in this phenomena. But when you go into a single case or talk to one person about their single experience, the first thing that you always have to do from our perspective is determine if there's a normal explanation for it. Because very
Mhm.
often there is. Even in the best of these paranormal activity cases, a good piece of it, sometimes a majority, has normal explanations, the
Mhm.
events themselves. So we actually have to go through all of the reported events or sightings that people have and say, no, that one was just a reflection. That one was this. No, this one seems like it was paranormal. So we
Mhm.
have to kind of separate the things out because people, when they have an experience, they get a little freaked out.
Yeah, so one of my experiences that I have is, as a kid, it was already after school, and me and my friends, we were walking through the school, and school is pretty old, and we were walking, and we saw all the swings just swinging in a like slow pace, but they were all swinging. We ran, we came back, and they were all still. So it was not windy, but I don't know if there's another explanation for that, which there could always be, but sometimes things happen and you don't really find an explanation for those things. And the thing that you want to blame it on is maybe ghosts.
Well, you're right. People do land on the ghost thing. I would say that's an unusual thing, but we can't say it's a ghost. We can't say it's not some sort of breeze that we're not noticing. We can't say that maybe there's something underground. There's a water pipe that's going under, it's causing vibration that's causing that to happen. Maybe there's some kids hiding in the bushes who are pushing the swings every once in a while when people are coming by. So you just have to leave it as unexplained in that sense.
And that's the problem also now with everyone on YouTube and having these paranormal experiences, because you don't know if what they're experiencing is actually real or has been already choreographed by them to
Right,
appear like,
right.
experiences, right?
Well, people are trying to go viral, and we're seeing videos of supposed ghosts and creatures and all sorts of stuff. So a lot of it's some really good AI, I have to say,
Hmm.
but also some good special effects even before that. It's entertaining, but you can't really necessarily go by that as evidence for something. You need a lot more than just that video. In fact, a video of supposed ghosts. I mean, people send them to me all the time, and
Hmm.
I really, people. I'm telling people to stop doing that,
Hmm.
um, because there's nothing I can tell from a video, no matter how good it is, or a photo for that matter. I can't tell you that that's a ghost.
Hmm.
I need a lot more information, even with a photo that's unusual, that you're pretty sure was something given the conditions. I want to see, for example, what's beyond the frame of the picture, what's beyond the frame of that video, who else was present, what did you actually experience? Because if it's just a weird photo and you didn't experience anything and nobody else experienced anything and it wasn't even a haunted place, all I can say is I don't have enough information to tell you what the actual explanation is, but I can't say it's a ghost.
So, what do you make about urban legends and people mm, taking photos of certain things and just saying this is because of so and so story?
I think that's good folklore, but there's nothing more you can say about it, honestly. I mean, ever since the beginning of photography, people have been faking photos.
Mhm.
So, and there's, I mean, the whole, back in the late 90s, there was started this whole orb phenomena where people are getting
Mhm.
these circular shapes on photographs. And to this day, we still see orb photos showing up on online where people are claiming that they are actually ghost spirits. And there's no evidence at all that a spirit shows up on a camera or on a photo as a flat circular thing on picture. More importantly, most of those can be explained photographically, and often very easily. So it just really, but people expect that these are ghosts because
Mhm.
they're unusual pictures. I've had people send me photographs that a friend took a picture of them.
Mhm.
So let's say a friend took a picture of you, and they send you the picture afterward and say, "Hey, I think there's a ghost in your house." And behind you, you see this wispy humanoid figure that's there. And then you just have to wonder. And people send pictures like that to me every once in a while. And what ends up happening is that very often they're from ghost photo apps on
Mhm.
phones. In fact, there was a period, maybe about 10 years ago, where I and some of my colleagues were getting all these pictures sent to us by people who had friends take pictures of them. And I could sometimes send back a picture with the exact same ghost, a picture of me with the same ghost,
Yeah.
and tell them, because the apps come with galleries and things like that. So it's from an evidential perspective, a photo, a single audio recording, those are not enough to say there's a spirit here at all. Just like a single photo won't say, think about UFO pictures or
Mhm.
UAP pictures. People take pictures of things in the sky and they saw it. Not only did they see it, other people saw it. And still, you can't say that's an alien spacecraft. You can't even say necessarily what it really was very often.
Right, because there's also something going on with religion and people that are religious blaming everything on religion and
On
operation
demons,
on
yeah,
demons,
demons and angels, yeah,
things like
yeah,
that. And
yeah.
that's also a problem because sometimes there could be an actual rational reason for things to happen, but that clouds their judgment and they think that it's all due to like a religious experience.
Well, I'll give you an example of that kind of idea because, again, the demon thing is coming from a religious perspective. And many ghost hunting groups, for whatever reason, have latched on to Zach Baggins
Mhm.
and his idea that it's all demons, or Ryan Buell, who had the show Paranormal State, same thing. It was so much demons. And I had somebody send me an audio claiming that this is clearly a demonic entity in these people's house, and because it's a growl, and it sounded
Mhm.
like a growl. Well, first of all, the people themselves, because I ended up talking to the clients, they did not think that there was anything demonic in their house. They did think there was something in their house, but they didn't think it was demonic. How do those ghost hunters know? And by the way, they ran out of the house after they got the growl on tape. How do they know that this wasn't a ghost dog?
Mhm.
That's number one. And B, somebody's stomach rumbling,
Mm.
which is something that sounds like a growl sometimes. And it's really this issue of what was actually happening. What were people experiencing? You can't claim it's a demon just because somebody saw a figure or got a growl. Because number one, the growl is not enough evidence to say this, because you don't really know where that came from. I'd have to know how they recorded it and so much more about that. We have to be very careful with that because you're trying to get actual evidence for something before you make a conclusion. And if you don't eliminate all the normal explanations, all the possible technical explanations, you can't even say this might be a spirit voice.
Right.
Can't get there. But the interpretation that something sounds like a growl or mumble or something else must be demonic is coming from mainly pop culture, but a lot of it comes from religion. I
Mhm.
mean, after The Exorcist, all of a sudden everybody had to put their Ouija boards away after the movie came out.
Right.
Um, and there's nothing wrong with those kinds of things. There's nothing actually, I try to argue with ghost hunters that if you're afraid of Ouija boards, you should be afraid of doing EVP because you're
Yeah.
asking a spirit to do something. Well, that's what you're asking with a Ouija board, isn't it? It's the same thing.
Does anyone ever get upset at you because they want something to really be real and you tell
Yeah.
them that it's not?
Yes, and in fact, before doing an investigation, I and the people I've taught over the years or worked with over the years, we tell people we insist on a pre-interview over the phone or Zoom these days. And one of the things I ask is if I come in and find normal explanation, first thing we're doing is trying to find normal explanations of each of the individual things. And I tell them very clearly, even in the best cases, the ones where I really think there's a ghost here, people are freaked out. So they're going to make assumptions about other stuff. So it's okay. But I'm going to find out if there's a normal explanation for all of it. And are you okay? Will you accept that if I can show you what the normal explanation is? And if they say, no, it's a demon, no, it's a ghost, I know it's a ghost, that's not going to be a reasonable place for me to go and investigate to work with them. I'm not the right person to do an investigation because we are going to try to determine that it's not a ghost first, because that's the only way to know that it is a ghost.
Mhm. Yeah, and so another thing that I like to uh, think about is so Mexico has this really popular urban legend of La Llorona, and I'm sure that everyone has heard about that urban legend.
Yeah, not only Mexico, there's variations of the woman in white all over the world. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah, I've also seen that variations of
yeah.
all over the world. Japan has this urban legend about the woman with the slit across the mouth. Also, there's Bloody Mary here in the U.S. They're really interesting,
Hmm.
but they do
Yeah.
have the like minor variations. And one of the things about Mexico is that in Mexico, a lot of these houses are concrete and they have metal doors, and if wind blows through metal doors, it causes that like a sound. So if
Hmm.
you have that across an entire country, you're going to pick up on an urban legend and try to find an explanation for those occurrences. So I like to think that that is why that urban legend is really popular in Mexico, and it's not because of that urban legend itself, but because of the environment and what experiences happen in that environment.
That makes good sense. I think that, a good ghost story is something that is told over and over again and does change over time as well.
Mhm.
And if there's anything in the physical environment that is spooky, it's easy to connect the spooky sounds um, to that urban legend or to that particular thing. And that's the case all over the world.
Mhm.
I teach a course in looking at various cultures and beliefs in psychic phenomena and ghosts and things like that. And there are common features to actual experiences people have. Here in the Bay Area, we had for many, many years, when I first moved here years ago, there was the story of a hitchhiking ghost in
Mhm.
an area called Niles Canyon. And there are hitchhiking ghosts all over the world, by the way. One of my colleagues found a Roman account of a hitchhiking ghost picked up by a charioteer in Roman times. So that story is all over. And I think the Twilight Zone did a great job of making that truly an urban legend way
Mhm.
back when. Um, but I said would talk to people when I first moved here and said, "Have you investigated the hitchhiking ghost in Niles Canyon?" It's like, "No, tell me about it." And they say, "Well, a friend of mine says that they experienced." Say, "Can I talk to your friend?" They come back and say, "No, the friend says he got it from somebody else." It's like there never is a first-hand witness of these things.
Mhm.
So these urban legends, just kind of the stories keep spreading, and they change, as we know, they change quite a bit. A colleague of mine who passed away a number of years ago, he'd been in the field for over 50 years. He told a story about doing an investigation of a haunted pub. He was in England.
Mhm.
And when they did the investigation and talked to all the witnesses and spent time there, they figured number one, there was no real evidence of a ghost. It was all stories that had been told for decades. And number two, it was not the best ghost story in the world. It was not a great
Mhm.
ghost story. So as he's sitting with his colleagues and the team and the people in the pub, like a lot of the locals, they're drinking a lot and they ended up making up a new ghost story that was a much better ghost story. That's the
Hmm.
story is told to this day that is the real ghost story in that
Really?
pub.
Do you have
Yeah.
any favorite urban legends?
I do like the hitchhiking ghost idea. I think
Mhm.
that's kind of a fun one. I went to school outside of Chicago, so there's Resurrection Mary, the woman who hitchhikes to the cemetery that she's buried in. That's a fun one as well. And I've talked to people who had secondhand stories. So
Really?
nobody had the word firsthand, but at least they talked to a cab driver who picked up this woman who disappeared at some point. And there are, I think those are kind of fun ones. The
Mm.
other one, which is not so much an urban legend, but interestingly enough, has been reported over the centuries, is the Headless Horseman in Sleepy Hollow, New
Oh
York.
yeah.
I grew up in that area, and I've been to Sleepy Hollow Cemetery and many times over the years, and I talked to a cop friend of mine at one point in the police department that handled that area, and he said, I don't know if it's people who are drunk or not, but every year, right around Halloween, for a few days on either side, people see the headless horseman and they come into the police station and they report him. So kind of a fun thing too.
Yeah, yeah, no, especially the hitchhiking ghost because it's always the same thing that you pick up a hitchhiker and then they sit in the back seat, something like that. Then you look back
Right,
on the rear view mirror and they're gone. And then there's also the dead bride and she's still wearing her wedding gown.
right. That's right. Yeah, and there's so many different variations of the ghostly urban legends. I think they're fun. I think they're fun stories. Telling ghost stories is a tradition that goes back thousands of years. And it's just something that um, we have to remember is part of human folklore. The idea of scaring people around a fire, regardless of the ghost story or something else.
Mhm.
That that is why we go to horror movies and thrillers, because we get that adrenaline rush when somebody freaks us out to some extent.
Yeah, because years ago I used to work late, and I would get home say 2 in the morning, and there was this road, and they would say that there was a hitchhiking ghost in that road, and I remember being terrified just driving through there and and seeing that ghost because it was just a story that was just told over and over and over again, and you believe these
Mhm.
things. I don't know about you because you are in the field, but.
Yeah, well, I mean, there have been times that I've been told those kinds of stories, and I used to do college lectures on a regular basis, and sometimes there'd be something like a road or something like that where they see strange lights or other things going on, and they would take me there, and
Mhm.
because I want to go, and nothing would happen. It's like walk away just totally disappointed. I really wanted something to happen at that point. Now, granted, I know that if something did happen, those students would have totally freaked out, but I'm glad, in some respects, I'm glad nothing happened, but at the same time, I would really like something to have happened.
Yeah, because you've never really experienced something that you've been afraid of, right? It's
No,
all
I've had many experiences, but nothing I've been afraid of at
yeah.
all.
Did you ever go into something with something in you just being afraid and nothing happening, or you've never really even had that?
Never really had that other than to worry about a couple places I've been taken into not being physically, the place was not safe. There were unsafe conditions in there. I actually didn't go into a couple places because it looked pretty bad from a dust a dust mold perspective, and I didn't
Okay.
want to challenge my allergies or my
Mm,
health for that.
yeah.
And that's something that we have to be very careful about with some of these old buildings too.
And that's another thing because a lot of these experiences are in old buildings, and if we know anything, is that it mold also changes your psychology and your
Yeah.
brain activity.
Yeah, black mold can cause significant issues, cause you to have hallucinations. I mean, there's so many different things that can happen, plus have a long-term effect if you're in that environment long enough. So it is one thing we make sure people are aware of and we look for in some
Mhm,
of the older places. Now, ghost investigations or actual sightings are not limited to old places.
mhm.
Many cases I've done have been in houses that were no more than like 5 or 10 years old. So
Yeah.
it really depends on it's not about where people die,
Mhm.
it's about where they lived. So that's why
Mm.
there's so many bars that are haunted. That's where there are a lot of hotels that are haunted, or restaurants are haunted, because the people who are haunting them, the actual, if there are ghosts there, they are there because these were special places to them when they were alive, and that's where they want to be after they die.
Yeah, especially schools.
They don't go to cemeteries.
I mean, especially schools. I know you've heard about
Yeah,
schools being
schools too.
haunted.
Yeah, schools. Yeah, that actually that is true. There are schools, colleges. I had a really interesting experience years ago lecturing at University of Miami of Ohio in a big old chemistry building in a
Mhm.
chemistry like lecture hall. One by one, all the tech that I had, everything from this is back during slide projector days. The slide projector stopped working. The video, they had multiple VCRs and they all stopped working, one after the other. The sound system went out, and there was a janitor who was in the back of the room who had even approached me at the beginning saying, "Do you mind if I stick around?" It's like, I don't care. He's laughing, and I said, "You come up here and tell me, why are you laughing?" He says, "Because I think it's the ghost of that old chemistry professor who screws around with everybody. I've seen him, and so has everybody else on the maintenance staff."
Yeah, wow.
So it became this really, instead of a lecture, it became this interview. It was actually one of the best events I've ever done,
Yeah.
because I could interview somebody live about this real experience and talk about those things.
Yeah, whether
But that
like
was,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, because it's like whether you believe it or not, it's always entertaining hearing these stories and
yeah,
these
yeah,
experiences.
yeah. And I think the students really liked the fact that they were sitting in a room with a ghost at the time.
Yeah. No, that's really fascinating. But listen, it's been a great conversation, and I just hope that we are able to do this again in the future because
Sure.
there's just a lot to learn about.
Yeah, absolutely. There's plenty to talk about.
Yeah, but
Happy to do so.
yeah, I mean it's been great though.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you.